Well, welcome to Unscripted with Owen and Tammy, and we're going to continue talking today about some incredible things with my friend and guest, Freddie Frye, who's joined me all the way from the Georgia area. As I said last podcast, he's still a hoot at, and he bleeds black and gold, and we've been friends for a long time. I just want to say, before we get started, this is our final podcast of this first season, and it's kind of bittersweet because it's been an incredible journey as we started talking about some stories that I have gone through in my life, and quite frankly, I didn't realize I had so many stories.
Right.
And so I guess after 60 years, you got a few to give out.
Some.
But so here we are. I believe I guess one of the greatest stories untold is our relationship with my friend Freddie. We grew up in church together, then we separated, and we've had a long parallel almost history that, as you said in last week, how I've pastored a largely African American church, and you pastored in mostly white churches.
Right.
And the churches that you've preached in have been mostly white.
Right.
And we've kind of connected the dots that it was because of our connection and our exposure as kids, and to this differences from both sides, that it prepared us for the longer journey, the bigger picture, the longer journey. And I'm thankful to the Lord for that, the diversity that God had brought into my life early, which made me comfortable with that. I don't even think I have any just American white friends. I do, but most of my friends, even if they're white, they're from another country. Like Harvey and Leslie, they're from England and South Africa.
Right.
So it just made me kind of like open to just all people. And I'm so thankful to the Lord. But I really believe our interaction early kind of just set the stage for that. That's normal.
Right.
That's the way it's supposed to be. And so I'm fine with that. And I'm thankful to the Lord, and my kids are the same way. They're just open to, and I'm thankful to the Lord because it's kingdom. When you read that Revelation chapter 12, and there's people from every tribe, every color, every nation, and that's the way we want it. It's truly the Rainbow Coalition. It's the real rainbow. And I'm thankful for that. We were talking about our journey, and then Freddie, it brought us to today. Not to repeat what we went through, we talked about last week, but we left talking about, are we two anomalies? Are we just special that we were friends and we've continued, even though we've lived in different places, we've kind of kept up with each other, even though we didn't talk every day, we've kind of known what's going on. And when I went through some of my struggles, you were calling and praying for me, and same vice versa. And here we are today, so many years later, 52 years later, on this podcast. Who would have thought?
I know, huh? Right.
I mean, who would have thought we were playing trumpet and listening to Earth, Wind, and Fire? I mean, just great. And you remember the times that we used to get in the back of the truck and play the horns, and we would play the Mardi Gras songs, and we would just somebody would drive us in their truck, and we would dun dun dun.
Wow.
Dun.
I totally forgot about that.
You forgot about that?
Yeah, that's true.
That's true. I mean, we would like play like we're in a parade, and we just riding in the street in the back of a truck.
Right.
And I mean, that's just you could do that in New Orleans. That's a New Orleans thing.
Right.
You get your horns. You could walk through the street and people come out, and it's the beauty of our culture.
Right.
But yeah, we had such a great time. But when we talk about us, it seems, oh, that's a fairy tale. That's like that's just unusual. You guys are special. Y'all were interacted. It was a perfect setup, which I don't doubt. I don't doubt that God did create that, because God does everything in beautiful. Everything's divinely orchestrated. I don't doubt that, but I do believe there's a response from both sides humanly that allows God to freely work within us. Your dad and my dad, they were pioneers, but there we are, special case. All these years, black, white, always understood both sides. We're able to talk about the issues clearly. Yet somebody might hear that and say, "Oh, well, that's special." It is special, but as we left, you said you felt like that there are key elements that need to be understood is why we were able to be special in a way. Can you just talk about that for a moment? Because there's other things I want to ask you that I really want to get into the nitty gritty, but just kind of lead us off, Freddie, where you think where we stopped, and just continue from there.
Yeah, I think the key was there are many voices that were speaking to us as young kids growing up in your white community and my black community. And I think when we left the church Monday through Friday, those voices were very strong. But what kept us grounded and what kept our relationship strong was the cross, the message of the cross, and how that superseded the voice of the cross, the voice of the kingdom. That superseded our worlds.
Right.
And our relationship did not cause us to deny who we were.
Right.
I respected who you are. You respected who I am. But we did not allow our differences to interfere with the relationship that was developed as a result of
because culturally, not to interrupt you, but culturally, like, back in the day, there were white radio stations, black radio stations that played black music and white music, R&B, rock and roll. And yet we both, I still like music that I kind of like grown up on, rock and roll, R&B, but then we cross-pollinated. But yet we never just said, well, I'm just going to love rock and roll to be close to my white brother. And because everything really was kind of segregated.
It was
in that way.
It was.
You really was. Today there's a lot of cross-pollination of musical genres. But back in the day, it was strictly
definitive. It was very definitive. Very definitive.
And if you And again, even then, I didn't even know that, white boys didn't really listen to R&B or they would appreciate it, but I loved it. I wasn't just like, I wanted to play it. I wanted to do it.
Yeah.
But that just reminds me, you're right. We didn't have a problem with being different.
Right.
Because, but then we appreciated the differences.
Right, because that was not the issue. That's not the issue. I think the voice, and I keep going back to this, and I have to, because there are a lot of things that comes historically with African Americans, with blacks in this country, that's painful, very, very painful.
And that I think I didn't know. I did know, but I didn't know. I didn't know the struggle. And we use that terminology, that phrase, the struggle is real. I didn't know. And I think that when the George Floyd thing happened, for those of us who have had black friends and have been close, I didn't know.
And vice versa, those of us who had white brothers that are close.
Even though I know we have a history in America of slavery, I'm aware of all of that. I didn't know that it was still so painful. And when that happened, I was caught like, oh, I'm around people of color all the time. And I'm not blaming anyone for this. I'm really not. I'm just being very real and honest. I didn't know. And when we started having conversation here in the church about what was going on, I'm almost have to apologize. I felt as if that, how come I didn't know? What was wrong with me? And so I had to really wrestle with a whole lot, Freddie. I'll be honest with you. I didn't really know how to respond. And we talked a little bit about that, which is why I'm so glad, because I always feel safe talking to you about everything. You know what I mean? It's like I can tell you, and you will tell me if you think I'm wrong. You will tell me that. I know you will.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Oh, yeah.
You've always have.
Right.
So I'm open to that. So I feel safe. And I think that some people don't have that safe. But tell us about, because some white folk in the church have black friends, but they're not aware of what my brothers and sisters on the other side go through. I mean, you want to say something?
Yeah. Let me use the analogy first. Every single one of us, if we were to look at, if you live long enough, every single one of us, somewhere on our body, bears a scar from something that happened to us in the past. I have a scar on my left foot, and I saw it. And one day I asked my mom, this is crazy, this big scar on my foot. Mom, how did that get here? She said, what do you mean, how did that get there? You and your brother Hurley was running around the ironing board, and I kept telling you guys, stop running around the ironing board because you might get burned. And he hit it, and the iron fell on my foot, perfectly on my foot. And she said she heard me scream. And she came, and it was just nasty. She had to really, and the crazy part about it was, over the years, the scar still remains, but the pain is gone. The scar is a reminder of an event that took place that brought a lot of pain to my mom and to me, mostly me. And so the scar is a reminder of a pain that I experienced in my past. Right. And if we were to look at our physical bodies, there's something, and if you live long enough, a surgery, a scar from a surgery, a wound as an athlete, and a lot of people carry inner wounds from an abusive situation with a family member, whatever. But here is what happens when that scar heals. You can live that over and by choice to live that over and over and over again, and it becomes definitive to, and you begin to identify with that. And so now, rather than moving forward, you keep getting trapped in what was. Not that you deny that ever took place, but you say to yourself, okay, this has healed, or I'm moving past this, or how can healing begin? When we look at the racial situation, and I'm going to be totally honest with you while we're being candid, in 2020 was a very tough year for me because I was in Atlanta at the time. Nobody was going anywhere. And we saw the George Floyd situation. We saw a man's life literally expired right in front of our eyes. So we saw two things. One, a man crying for his life, begging for his life. And you can see the stress on his face, regardless of what was going on in his life. And you saw another man who had the power to allow that life to continue. But that life was taken, expired, and then look in his face with no remorse whatsoever that this man's life expired. And as a believer in Jesus Christ, one, and a black man, two, not making one greater than the other, I thought about a lot of my relationships. And you came to my mind. You came in my heart. You did.
No,
and I'm going to be totally honest
with you.
Both
were in the same place.
I'm going to be totally honest with you. I wondered, how tough is this for City Church? And my buddy Owen, how tough is this? Because the bottom line was this: the enemy is not black, white. To me, in my book, he's not black, he's not white, he's not Hispanic, he's not Muslim, he's not. The enemy, according to kingdom truth, is Satan. Bottom line, I don't care how you look at it, it is. And it was staged so perfectly to bring about division in the church, to again bring about another division in the church. But I think also that George Floyd and all those situations that happened in 2019 and 2020 really exposed what was in the heart of many people who confessed that they knew Christ, both black and white.
Well, you're so right. For me, it was the perfect storm. COVID, March 2020. We're separated. People they're divided. They're at home. They can't even come to church. Then the George Floyd, the social unrest, the rioting in the streets. People are the outrage. I too. I don't think it took. I think for me, seeing what took place, there's no doubt that was an atrocity. There's no doubt. Then, you know, my story. I came up with a heart condition, and I had to have surgery. And so I was on my back for 3 months. So we had COVID, we had the social unrest, which now I'm a white pastor, pastoring a mostly black church. I can't talk because I'm out of the pulpit. I can't touch my people. Then people that of color that I had been friends with for so long. And I'm not saying this as a complaint because I don't want to make it about me. I'm just talking about where we were. They started questioning me as a man. People were, and they would write me and say, listen, Bishop, I love you, but I think my kids need to be raised with a black pastor. And these were people that I'd led to the Lord. That they weren't just people who came to the church. I was there when their family was almost on the brink of divorce, and I was able to, through the Lord, to step in and help them and overcome a lot of their problems. Because, as again, our God is not black or white. The devil, our enemy, is not color. He's colorless. But all of a sudden, you're thrusted into this tension that you never had to. I've always prided myself, and maybe I was a little prideful of being cool with people of color. I was like, I've always been cool with everybody. Everybody knows, people know, if anybody's cool, I am. And I was almost proud of that. But that didn't take away the fact that I wasn't really aware. That's where I was. That's where I was. But I still had to learn. Even though I had you as a friend, I've been around the African American community. I still learned I had to know a little bit more. I get that. But all of a sudden now everything, and you're right, the people that you thought were with you, and I'm thinking that's what people thought about me. They were questioning, is he really as cool? Or is he okay with me as it's always been? And so you couldn't even answer because I'm on my back. And there were some white pastors that never said anything that could have said something.
Right.
And you talked about that. So I just want to say where we were, but and I don't want to interrupt you because what you got to say is, I know we've just talked a little bit about it, but it's powerful. What was going on? What was happening there? Finish up what we were. I'm just kind of telling you, that was the perfect storm for City Church.
Yeah.
It was a perfect storm. And boy, I wondered if I was going to even be here.
Right.
Honestly. I
Physically
didn't know if
for your
anybody
life.
wanted to come hear me preach anymore. Because, that's just the way it is.
I sat there and I watched that situation and the reality. See, living for Christ and being a kingdom man doesn't escape you from the reality of the pain of living.
No doubt.
It does not. And I don't. Let me just turn to the camera and just tell them, for those of you who are loving Jesus, and and regardless of what your ethnic background is, loving Christ and serving Him does not exempt us from the pain that comes from this fallen world. But what you choose to do with that pain says everything about who Christ is in you. What you allow Him to do and help you and heal you with that pain determines whether you move on and how deep you go with Him at that particular point. So here was a situation where I'm looking at this whole thing in 2020. That it's like in every major city, explosion, racial tension. And I'm looking at this and I'm seeing this. I'm like, I'm not even believing that this is even my country. This is even America. Because normally we see that in a lot of countries where there is totalitarianism and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So we see this. And it was staged perfectly by the enemy. Staged perfectly. No one was going anywhere.
You're right. You couldn't.
No, people were glued to the TV just for some form of entertainment. And the perfect storm hit this country. And he staged it perfectly. It couldn't have happened at a better moment. And so I sat there and I was totally angry. And I found this anger welling up inside of me. And I'm just going to be honest with you. The enemy took me all kinds of places. My emotion was all over the place. Be it white, black, this, that. I was all over the place. And then finally, my wife told me, and I thank God for Nadine. She said, baby, we need to pray. Let's just pray. Not just for the country. You and I need to pray for the stability of our leadership in the church.
Well, I mean, did you feel at the time that maybe you were questioning some of your white brothers?
It wasn't the fact that I questioned my white brothers.
I mean,
what I got angry was over the systems that allowed this to continue even now. The anger was the systems. And
right.
How do I navigate? I got 2 black boys, young men. How do I navigate my boys through this? Because they're in their 20s. How do I navigate them through this? I got a daughter who is 30-something years old. How do I navigate them through this? When we've taught them, when I've raised them in a predominantly white environment, how do I navigate? What's going on with them? What's going on in his heart? One graduated from the University of New Orleans. The other one graduated from Oral Roberts University. My daughter graduated from Nicholls State. And so that was a huge concern to me as a father, not as just as a father, but as a kingdom man and a kingdom father. So I'm sitting there, and it was challenges. I would go to bed and say, God, I don't like what I'm feeling. I don't like what's seeping into my heart, the anger, the hatred. And at the same time, I'm trying to hold on to the truth of the gospel. I'm trying to hold on to the truth of the message of the kingdom. And I wrestled. I wrestled. I wrestled. But I never charged God foolishly. I never charged him foolishly. And I always tried to make sure I live by what Martin Luther King Jr. said, judge a man by the content of his character. Because in every facet of society, and I'm sitting up there and God just ministering to me. He says, Freddie, every facet of society, you got that which is righteous and that which is unholy. In every facet. He said, and he brought me even to my career. I'm a coach. Because a coach loses his job or gets fired or get put in jail because he had an illicit affair, sexual affair with a minor, a young lady, does that mean all coaches and you being a coach, you're just like this person? Absolutely not. And God literally started showing me the different, to judge the piece, not the whole.
Right.
Judge the piece, not the whole. And then he brought me to the reality of the type of world that we're living in and who the real enemy is and what his main objective is. And I think the fact that I had a wife that prayed with me, prayed together, it grounded me. And it allowed me to navigate the pain, not to push the pain away, but how do I bring healing to my heart? Because you can't give what you don't have.
Right.
And I listened to the voices that was speaking through that. And there were certain voices that I chose not to allow to speak into me, even though there was a reality of what they were saying. But when it got out of pocket and it didn't line up with what I understand the kingdom message, that's when I pulled back away from that particular voice. And so for me as an African-American man, a black father who try to live his life according to biblical teachings and have a biblical worldview on the world around me, here's the ultimate. At the end of the day, and I'm not talking about when the sun goes down, I'm talking about when the candle of my life is getting ready to blow out.
Right.
I will have to stand before God and give an account for how I chose to live my life in every season of my life and in every circumstance of my life.
Right.
Is Jesus Christ Lord to me when everything is going in reverse? When I can't make sense of the world around me, is he still Lord?
Right, that's good.
That's the key. Is he still Lord to you?
Right, that's good.
Or are you ready to abandon him because there's something that you don't understand or something should have been done? So for me, my prayer was I prayed for all of my black brothers and white brothers and brown brothers who stand behind the office of the pulpit and speak truth, even at the detriment of people walking away. Because here's the bottom line. The Bible talks about justice and equity and fair play and treatment and fair treatment of all people flows from God's throne.
Right.
And if you declare that you are a Bible-believing kingdom pastor, then there's no way you can't speak. You're supposed to speak on inequities of all people,
Right.
because God loves all people.
Right.
I think the 2020 situation was a very pivotal moment for the church, because whatever the church did not do in the 1860s, God says, I'm going to give you another chance in 2020.
Well, I think you're right, and I think that we live in a fallen world, and the fallen world will always be that.
It's going to be that.
But the church, we're supposed to be different. I think we fell short.
Extremely. And let me talk to that.
We fell short.
Let me talk to that for quickly. A lot of the generation of children that are growing up today, 18, 19, 20, 25, 30, 35 years old, grew up, especially in the African American. We grew up, the church is an integral part of the community.
Right.
And I'm almost afraid to say that a lot of the children who are now parents, who are now the 20-something, the 30-something, the 40-something, they grew up experiencing the overwhelming joy of a Sunday service on Sunday, but saw the hypocrisy Monday through Saturday. And they said, okay, if this is it, a lot of children grew up with the high of the emotions on a Sunday, but experienced the pain behind the scenes. And they said, okay, when I become an adult, I don't want this anymore. So now you've got this generation of young people, black and white.
Well, I think it's both. I think you're right.
Black and white. Black and white.
There's been hypocrisy on both sides.
Yeah.
And you know, in regards to the racial issue, because I thought, and you could sit from the outside or inside, oh, we've made great strides in the church because now we have churches that are mixed. When I was a kid, that was really rare. Well, to have just a one black family in an all-white church was very rare. And then our church grew even more interracially integrated. And I felt like, and anyone listening to us could probably say, oh, I thought we made great strides, that we had come together. We weren't, because what is it? They say that the most segregated hour
in America
is on Sunday morning. And yet we've had churches that are mixed. Black pastors pastoring a mixed congregation, a white pastor, come that far. But then all of a sudden, bam, this all comes to the surface. And then people, and I mean, you can speak to it. They were like, I don't want to be around that. I'm like, we didn't come as far as I thought. What do you say to that in the church now? I'm talking about.
I say great opportunity. I see opportunity. I see an opportunity. The Bible calls Satan the accuser of the brethren. He goes before God day and night and says, look, here's this black pastor. But I'm gonna allow something to come up, an event to come up, and show him and show you that he's not who he says he is, both black or white.
So you're saying that we really did make some strides.
We did.
But the enemy was using it as a chance to.
But the opportunity to address issues from a biblical kingdom. See, here's what the thing I share all the time. If man is the problem, man cannot come up with the solution.
Right.
We keep turning to man to be the solution, but he's not the solution.
Right.
God ultimately solved the problem, and he gave the solution in his son Christ.
Right.
Anytime we put that as a secondary answer to our problem, and we go after the things that we create to try to solve, we're going to constantly deal with the issues. One generation is going to deal with it again. The next generation is going to deal with it again. Next generation. What caused us to have the type of relationship we had was that we had a biblical kingdom home that kept allowing us to respect the difference, but still love that difference and love each other as a result of it.
I totally agree. The differences are beautiful.
Extremely.
And yet the interaction and the cross-pollination is beautiful too.
Yeah.
And yet still being true to who you are.
Right.
And I think that in the times past, the church was good at that. We'd go to a culture, especially the Protestant church. We'd go to a culture and we tried to make everybody dress. It's like I would always laugh about it. I don't want to go to Africa and listen to hill songs. I want to go to Africa and hear some drums, man. Somebody play some rhythms.
Right.
You go to churches in certain areas and they try to make them Americanized. I don't want to Americanize every world. I want to go somewhere and listen to the people sing in their native tongue, your sound, your culture. I think that. But here's the dilemma, because the world's always going to be the world. How do we, at this moment, because you said something powerful, we could have gotten some things right in 1860. No doubt we shouldn't have we didn't have to have a civil war.
No.
But because people would not forgive and come into reconciliation, war was inevitable.
Yeah.
Here we are in 2020. I felt that the enemy's plan was for Civil War II.
Yeah.
And that still his plan. How can we, this is just us, Freddie and Owen, on Owen and Tammy's podcast, Unscripted. What can we say and do today to tell the young men and young women? I can't to the black youth because I haven't been through your pain. No matter how much I try to empathize, I've not gone through the abuse. I think for white pastors, they need to recognize that it's there. It's real. When I sat down with our young men and women of color, and they said, yeah, Bishop, it's like that. It's like that. I didn't try to deny that it's not there. You have to admit, Houston, we've got a problem.
Yeah.
Now, how do we solve it? How do we speak to it? Don't be silent. I hated that I was laid up in a bed for 3 months when all that was going down. But here's my dilemma, Fred. I was afraid to, I don't say afraid to say anything because I've never been afraid to say anything or say something. I didn't want to say the wrong thing.
That's the double-edged sword that I think.
I loved, I wanted to say the truth. And yet, young men here help me when I wanted to post something. I didn't want to post on my Instagram the wrong thing or try to look fake. That, I wanted to be real and genuine. And they would help me. But I think that was the, it was not about being quiet. It was about, I want to say the right thing. And I think that's what you were going to say, right?
Right. I think
the two-edged sword.
Right. The two-edged sword that a lot of my white brothers face is silence. They get judged for the silence. You should have said something. And then the other part of the sword is you said something, but you said it wrong. Because here's the reality. I don't know what it is to be a homeless Indian. I don't. That's not my culture. I don't know. But I have a lot of kids that I taught who are homeless Indians that I've treated just like they were my sons and daughters.
Right.
Okay? I don't know what it is to live in a white culture, but I've got just as many white students that I've taught that I would raise them like they were my sons and daughters.
Right.
I've taught a lot of our black African-American kids in both the affluent neighborhoods and not so affluent neighborhoods, and I love them as if they were my son or daughter. Now notice in every element, the key through all of that was love. You see, love sometimes means admitting, I don't know. I need you to help me with this. And we're afraid to say we don't know for the fact that we might get judged wrongly. The reason why we can have this conversation is because our love is strong enough to allow each other to be transparent.
Exactly.
That's the key right there.
It's
and you know place. I won't judge you, and you won't judge me.
It's a safe place.
Yeah. And you and I refuse to allow the outside forces outside the kingdom to divide us because the message of the kingdom was stronger than the message that was outside. So I really believe it must start first with the acknowledgement that pain does exist. Even though you have never experienced the pain, do what we're doing now. Churches all over America, brothers, sisters, white, black, do what we're doing right now.
Right.
Being able to talk about the relationship rather than run from it. The second thing that is so powerful is this. Remember I told the story about when my father was out of work and they brought in the 9, 10, 11, 12 wheelbarrows?
Yeah.
Your dad could have talked to my dad all day long about how much he loved him. But what was more definitive was when he showed him,
no doubt,
in his moment of crisis.
That's powerful.
In his moment of crisis. In a
Actions
moment of
speak
crisis.
louder than words.
Look, here's the interesting thing. When the world system is governed by Satan, do what it does, the church has to respond the way Christ would have responded.
Right. I totally agree.
That's the key.
That's good.
When we don't respond the way Christ wants us to respond, you're going to get flesh results. Even at the risk of being judged wrong, help me. I need, because what's common among us is stronger than what's different, what divides us.
Right.
And that is the message of the cross. You see, I tell people this all the time. When the Romans were getting ready to crucify Christ, he carried the horizontal beam, but the vertical beam was already on the place of the skull. Okay, watch this. If the cross is where the playing field got leveled and where our redemption took place, the healing, the spiritual divide between the Father and humanity, the cross, then there was two things that absolutely happened when that cross was erected. The vertical beam, as Christ was nailed to it, repaired the relationship between God and humanity. But the horizontal beam was where Christ brought the two humanity, brought them together and repaired.
Through Christ.
He repaired the relationship. Vertical beam, God and man.
The horizontal.
Now they won in Romans. The horizontal beam is now bringing the two that was enemies together through Christ. And you can't do it any other way but through that.
Only through that.
Because you can't legislate love. If it was true when they signed the ended slavery, the emancipation, okay, and they put it into law, we know what that did from some places that was already out of the union. It would have already solved. We wouldn't have the 2020 issue. So you cannot legislate love. You can't put love on black and white paper. So what happens is there has to be something stronger, something more powerful. And that is what Christ did at the cross. And as long as a black man and a white man and an Asian man and an Indian is willing to say, okay, let's level the playing field, but let's deal with the issues of the pain, because oftentimes man's way of dealing with pain is like putting a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound. That's all we're doing. You're still hemorrhaging. You're still bleeding.
Right.
Oh, but look what we've done. We put this Band-Aid on this. No. Only Christ can heal a man from the inside out, to where he can look at a man who was once his enemy, now as his brother.
Right.
With all of the stuff swelling around him. He can come and says, man, my heart's bleeding. I'm angry right now. Why are you angry? Man, this is what I saw. He said, okay, let me still love you and still pray for you, my brother, regardless of what the skin color is. So it has to be to understand that the systems of this world cannot bring the type of healing that we want in the system, in the world today. But the church has been given the responsibility of bringing that healing, and we have failed across the board. And the 2020 situation, the George Floyd situation showed it. 1860, it showed it.
I think
we have that responsibility.
We joined together in worship and praise and thanksgiving, but we didn't really address the bigger issue.
But that's where the challenge was, because here's the thing. I really believe in every critical juncture of human society, things happen where the church has to take a stand. And oftentimes we fail and we missed it. Now, how do we demonstrate that? Watch this. There are many of you sitting here listening to this podcast. And when I pulled up into his church, Pastor, I pulled up in your church, my wife and I, we saw young brothers and sisters on their posts, adequate, serving the kingdom. They're serving. I go to a lot of churches. I don't see that in a lot of churches. Okay? I don't see that in a lot of churches. Just the excellence. But here's where you make the statement. Remember I told you about the wheelbarrows? If you really want to make a difference, okay? Kirk Franklin did a concert with Maverick City Music. And in one of the songs, it says, if you want to know what heaven looks like, it looks like me and you. When people walk into your church, does heaven look like that church? How many people sits on your pastoral staff that don't look like you? Right. I agree. We can preach that all day long about what the kingdom looks like, but that's futuristic. What does it look like today? Right. What does it look like today? Because there has to be an intentionality in the earth. When Jesus prayed, Lord, make them one as you and I are one. Do you realize that's the only prayer that has not been answered yet?
Yeah.
That's the only one.
That is true.
That's the only one that has not been answered yet.
That's true. That's true.
The only one. And Paul was very adamant when he says in Ephesians chapter 2, now the two have become one, and it's called the church. We're not expecting Washington, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue to get this country right. They can't. They can't do it. It'll never happen. So I'm telling all my Republican brothers, my Democratic brothers, my conservatives, whatever, I'm telling you now, you're wasting your time. Now, does that mean we don't vote? No, you got to vote. It's simply you got to pray. What do we do? I pray for every man that has ever sat in that White House. I pray for every single Lord, use the office for your glory. Touch their heart.
I think we've just gone at it from a different perspective.
Yeah.
My Republican brothers and sisters, because when the whole George Floyd thing took place afterwards, because we're a mixed church, the Republicans said I had gone the other way. And then all of my Democratic friends' church said, oh, you didn't say enough. I think when it's all said and done, let's let nationalism has invaded the church.
Oh, no doubt, no doubt, no doubt.
Jesus was adamantly against nationalism.
Yes.
I'm not against nationalism in that you're a black man.
Right.
I'm a white man. I have views. But I hear some of my white brothers say he calls Democrats Democrats. I'm like, are you kidding me?
You got to be kidding me.
What? Where are you coming from? Preach the kingdom.
Yes, sir.
The kingdom of God on our staff. It's mixed. I was with our elders and pastors last night. It was probably one of the greatest meetings I've been in with our pastoral staff last night. An array of genders, colors, age groups.
We see it.
That, to me, is just a little snippet of what heaven is.
And the beauty of that is, what is the first thing you do as a church? And I'm talking to the churches all over the world. What is the first thing you do as a church? And when I say church, I'm not talking about a denomination. I'm not talking about a building. I'm talking about those who say that they're born again. When your culture or when your country is in a crisis, what is the first thing you do? When I say crisis, I'm talking about economic crisis. I'm talking social crisis. I'm talking a health crisis. What is the first thing the church should do or does when that crisis occurs? Because every crisis gives the church an opportunity to be two things, both salt and light. Christ cannot be our second thought. He has to be the first principle. He has to be number one. Hey, guys, here's the thing. We need divine intervention for this.
Right.
I really believe if the church collectively, even if it's by Zoom in 2020, would have been on the Zoom, said like, guys, this is crazy. This is happening on our watch. Not so. White brother, he called Tony Evans. Tony Evans called one of his wives and said, hey, we're going to intercede in behalf of our nation and behalf of our children together collectively. Because this is our watch. We weren't born in 1860.
Right.
We're here now with the technology to be able to speak and give voice to kingdom because of how two young men of two different cultures yet came together under the bonds of the cross and able to tell a story. And this, we say we're an anomaly. I believe this is happening all over the world.
No, I agree.
You got this Jewish brother and this Muslim brother that said, like, man, our families were bitter enemies, but because of the cross.
The cross.
But because of the cross.
And I think that's what for us, the questioning, no doubt we're going to be questioned, but do we pass the test?
Yeah.
I think ultimately we can say some things and do some things differently, but ultimately who you truly, really are.
Right.
And we did that when we were, Tammy and I had conversations with people individually when they were questioning, like, I don't know what's going on, and we'd say, hey, remember the kingdom. Remember the kingdom. What did God say to you? It got you here to City Church, and then we would remind, I'm talking about my African brothers and sisters, African American. Hey, we know, I think people just they need to acknowledge, I get it. Maybe I don't feel you, maybe I don't know your pain, but I can see you hurting. And I think that's what helped us to be able to mend some hearts that were just, because like you would have mothers come to me and say, how can I raise my kid, my two black sons in this environment? And we're like, we know the world's falling, but the church is going to be different.
Here's the practical
It's
thing
going to
I
be
see.
different.
Here's the practical thing I see you do, and across it. Where do we begin? How do we begin? First of all, the church has to acknowledge that there is pain. That's the first thing. We got to acknowledge that pain exists. Number two, we've got to put some muscle to the hustle, which means, are the churches in our public schools? Or do we have men of every color coming into our public schools to define what male masculinity looks like from a kingdom perspective and offering their time to spend time in those low-income schools and mentor these boys? Can the church open their doors to these little boys and little girls of every race that's struggling and set up tutorial sessions where they're teaching them how to read? Because every church should be able to touch every facet of their community. That's why you're there. It's not about just getting money from that community. Can we now go and infiltrate into that school where the public school systems are failing, where we can bring hustle to the muscle, muscle to the hustle, and help mentor those young boys, show up at basketball games. The church is showing up, being and connecting with those programs in high school, middle school, elementary schools. So there was and then here's the thing, holding our political representatives responsible for the choice they make. The church needs to be heard.
Yeah.
The righteous church needs to be heard. Hey, look, I voted for you, this, that, and the other, but here's what I see. I'm not coming at you wrong, but this is not righteous.
Yeah.
Not right, because right could be subjective.
Right.
Righteousness is objective.
Right.
So here's why this is not righteous, and hold them accountable. And then the pastors that stand behind the pulpit, you got to hold your life accountable too, Doc. You can't be saying one thing and live something else.
You got to live it right. You
got to
live holy.
You got to live
pure.
And I think if the church gets itself together and not be blasting at each other, and then go out and infiltrate the culture with the message of the kingdom in every facet, then when a crisis like this hit, black, white, Hispanic, our brothers will not be judged wrong, because I've seen you put the work in before the crisis.
Yeah.
The reason why the crisis was spilled over is because we didn't do the work before the crisis.
That's beautiful. I mean, you've given us so much to talk about, so much to think about, that it's fuel for thought, but thought for activity. Got to get busy doing the work. One of the things that I'm proud that we're doing right now, we're trying to get back into all the public schools here. We were at one time, and so many of them, changes in charter schools and stuff like that. But the Lord is opening those doors. You are right. That is the key. Like going back to your dad, the love that was showed. The love that was showed was greater than all of the words that were spoken.
The shown love was greater than the spoken love.
No doubt. Well, Freddie, this has been so awesome for you and I to relive and chronicle our childhood, and then to just talk about it in the perspective of how it can help somebody. I think that's the beautiful thing. Our life has meaning when the Lord is at the helm.
Yeah.
Our life was, I've said this to you, my life is not my own. Even I've got 4 kids, and it's a pattern there, and all of these things. It don't belong to me. So when God wants to use me somewhere, I just have to say yes. I have to say yes. And I'm demanding. I know from our conversation, I'm going to be more intentional on acknowledging the pain that my brothers and sisters of color have been through. I have been, but I'm going to be more. I'm going to do it more. I think for our conversation, a safe place has helped me to realize, what can I do? God has spoken to me through you about what I can do more. I've done some, but I need to do more. how I can acknowledge that.
And I'm going to speak this, and this is truth. And I don't know how your audience is going to take this. But from an African-American standpoint, I don't want you to acknowledge, and I know your heart, so you my buddy. Too many times our white brothers are demanded to acknowledge out of guilt. Don't do anything out of guilt.
No,
and I know that's not what you do. And because if you're going to do it out of guilt, you won't have the blessings of God, for it won't be genuine, okay? And so I always say this. What allowed us to do this today was that the love that we had for God was genuine, even to the point to where it allowed us to have the conversation to withstand against all of the backdrop that you and I experienced. Because here's the thing. Before that was a Tammy and a Nadine.
Yeah.
That was an Owen and a Freddie.
And that's true.
And that was Christ.
And that's one of the things I went through even. It's like, hey, am I only going to say I love this person
Right.
because they want me to tell them I love him?
Right.
Don't it mean more
Right.
when it really comes from within me?
The choice. I choose to love you.
But I think sometimes when we are made aware, like our conversation has brought, that I know where my genuine heart is.
Right.
But it's like my kids. I love my kids so much. But do I tell them I love them enough? Mm-hmm. Do I let them know that I'm proud of them enough? Even though I have said that, I've heard one said that you should let them know, and you also need to say it, not just do it. Because some people give good things, and they never say I love you to your kid.
Right.
But when it comes to our brother and race relationship, my inner heart is squared away with God. But sometimes I need to be more intentional in just letting them know,
Right.
I love you, and show it more.
When I stand before God, He's going to ask me, I sent you to Owen. What did you do with that relationship? When you stand before God, He's going to ask you, I sent Freddie to you with this relationship. What did you do with it? And we want God to look at us and say, Freddie, Owen, well done.
Well done.
Well
That's
done.
what we want. Well,
Yeah.
I believe this podcast has been well done. And I mean, I say that not because it's you and I, but because I truly believe the Holy Spirit has orchestrated this entire podcast. This is our final one of this season, and I'm thankful to God that He's just given us some new direction.
Amen.
And being able to have you come and to spend these last two together on what I believe is probably one of the most important issues concerning, we know the world, but the church.
Right.
Because the church
That's the emphasis. That's the emphasis.
The church is what I'm concerned about. I'm concerned about the world. God so loved the world, He gave His life. But so goes the world, so goes the church.
Right.
And if the church is not doing well, we can't expect much from the world.
Right.
So thank you for giving us the insight. I've learned a whole lot. And I pray those of you who have been able to tune in, that you have heard the gospel, you've heard the truth, and you've enjoyed it. If you haven't yet, go like and subscribe so that you'll hear about other things that we plan on doing in the future. Thank you for joining us again,
Yes.
Freddie. Thank you for coming. Love
Appreciate
you, bro.
you, man. Appreciate
Have
you.
a blessed week.